All right, welcome to Educastle International Consult. This is our official channel where we teach you everything you need to learn. Why not? Our foundational learning today is titled Introduction to Learning, and we're going to be looking at the aspect. What aspect are we actually looking at today? All right, we're going to be looking at the aspect, the 5 etiquette rules to learning. Now, the question is, how do we learn? People tell you, students tell you, children tell you, I go to school to learn. But the question is, what is the end result of learning? What is learning itself? How do you learn? How many of us actually realize that we need to learn how to learn in order to learn? Because the end result of learning is earning. What do you earn after learning? So when you say you're learning, what are your earnings? What are your expectations? What do you have at heart that at the end of my learning, what are the results of your learning? So let's find out to see, what does it mean to learn? Now, the foundational rules for learning are just 5. And these 5 rules were delivered to me by the Spirit of God on a certain day I was going for a children event. Permit me to share them with you. And the first rule, etiquette rule, like you hear the word, they are etiquettes. What are etiquettes? They are guidelines, they are standards, they are morals, they are ways in which you do things to ensure that you get the right result. So the number 1 etiquette rule to learning is always listen, listen, and listen when learning. So say to yourself, I will always listen, listen, and listen when learning. We need to understand one thing. I have ears, but does having ears make me to listen? I doubt that. My ears gives me the opportunity to hear sounds. That is to say, I'm not deaf. So the fact that you're not deaf or that I am not deaf means I can hear. But does that mean I'm listening? I doubt that. Now, for you to listen, it means you have to make a choice. Listening has to do with a decision. To listen means you must choose. Now, there are situations whereby someone is talking to you. It could also be daddy and mommy, and you're not just interested in what they're saying. But can you tell daddy and mommy that? No, you can't do that. Now, there are times your teachers are talking, and guess what? You don't just want to listen, but must they find out? You dare not. Make sure you don't do that when you're in the classroom. You listen. And that's why we're here. We're learning how to learn. So the first stage in learning is I must learn, you must learn how to listen. In other words, you must make a choice to listen. Because the reason you have gone to school is to learn something. The reason mommy and daddy have sent you to school is because they wanted to return with earnings from your learnings. So listening is a choice. So for you to listen, and listen, you must keep paying attention. And that is the choice of listening. Etiquette rule number 2. What do you think it is? For you to listen, you must avoid distractions. So the etiquette rule number 2 says, I can avoid distractions. I can always avoid distractions and pay attention to have retention. For you to listen, you make a choice. To do what? To pay attention. While paying attention or to pay attention, you must avoid distractions. Never forget, the first distraction you can have is yourself. Remember, we say you have to make a choice. If you're not distracted, no one can distract you. Not your classmate, not the bird flying outside, not the noise in the other classroom. Why? You came to school to listen. You came to school to pay attention, to avoid distraction, so that at the end of the day of your learning, you have earnings. Etiquette rule number 2. I can always avoid distractions and pay attention to have retention. Then the question is, what is retention? It is your ability to retain your learnings. It is your ability to be able to replicate what your teachers, your instructors, your coaches have taught you. In other words, when I ask you a question based on something I've taught you, would you be able to answer? Oh, if your answer is yes, then you're on the path of retention. Now, it doesn't just end there. Would you be able to teach somebody else the same thing I've taught you? If your answer is yes, then you have retention. So, etiquette rule number 3. I can always stay focused and have 100% concentration. Learning involves paying attention. Learning requires that you listen. Learning requires that you're focused, not 99.9, but 100% concentration. So while you're in the classroom, while mom is talking to you or dad is talking to you, someone is giving you an instruction. You need to stay focused. That's not the time to think of anything else except what you're being told. That is not the time to wonder what may be happening somewhere else except what you're being told. Because that is the only reason you wouldn't forget. Have you ever been in a situation, mommy has asked you to go get something from the room, and in less than 10 seconds you left her presence? You began wondering, what did mommy ask me to pick? Now you decided to assume, then you picked something else. And you were like, oh, thinking you were right. And when you got to mommy, what was the feedback? She smiled at you. Some of you would have gotten a spank, I guess. So we need to stay focused and have 100% concentration. So learning etiquette number 4. I can always follow instructions and corrections for the right directions in order for me to achieve my desired positive destination, or in order for me to get to my desired positive destination. Let's look at the content words in this expression. Number 1, instructions. For you to be a good learner, you must be such a listener that follows instructions. Now, for you to get to the end of your earnings, you must be willing to follow corrections, to listen to corrections. Because in the field of learning, in the game of learning, in the profession of learning, there will be errors. Okay? There are no problems. Errors are part of learning. But you mustn't continue to make errors. You must learn to follow corrections. You must learn to make your corrections. And that is why etiquette rule number 4 says, I can always follow instructions and corrections for the right direction to get to my positive destination. Take note, the word positive. Now, People like to do some wrong things, okay? So when you choose to do a wrong thing, would you get a positive response? Or do you get positive answers? The answer is no. So when you choose to do the right thing, it gives you a positive result. So in learning, in other words, when you are engaged in learning, it must be a learning towards a positive result. For instance, would you want to learn how to steal? What kind of result do you think that would give to you as a student, as a learner? Would you want to learn how to tell lies? Oh, what kind of result do you think you're going to get from it? So as a learner, your focus, your concentration, your earnings must be towards a positive result, a positive destination. And so that's what rule number 4 says. And finally, etiquette rule number 5, and this is about the most important part of it. Many a times in this part of the world, while I was growing up and teachers ask us questions, it's always like a chorus. And what do we say? Before we get there, let's find out. What is etiquette rule number 5? I can always ask questions. Seek clarity. Avoid assumptions. Speak my mind when learning. Why? Because nobody knows everything. Nobody. Not even the richest man in the world. Elon Musk doesn't know everything. He knows some things. Jeff Bezos knows some things. Because the good thing about knowing everything is that you can solve all situations. You can solve all problems. But look at the world today. Are people not still hungry? Are people not dying? Are people not having challenges? Now, the moment man can solve all problems, there will no longer be war anywhere. If man can actually solve all problems, then there will be peace everywhere. As man actually thought of that the possibility of me solving every problem. Do you know the moment we get to that thought, then we become gods indeed. Because a God is such a God that solves problems in positive ways. Gods wouldn't create distractions. So as a learner, you must always ask questions. To ensure that your questions are right, you must seek clarity. You must avoid assumptions. 99.9% of problems in the world today is based on assumptions. I think this might work. This could work. And at the end of the day, we're seeing the results. We have to be sure. Obviously, like I said, there could be errors, but we can't continue to make errors. We must choose to get it right. Because errors are part of learning. You see, it's going to take a big while to become a God who can always do things right. So don't forget. The etiquette rule number 5 is one of the most important of the 5 rules. And the 5 rules do not work in isolation. They work in synchronization. They work to help each other. And they already have a logical arrangement. How do I mean? You can first learn to follow instructions before you learn to listen. You need to learn to listen to follow instructions. At the same time, you can't choose to stay focused if you are not listening. So the foundational rule for learning remains, it is listening. So for you to learn, you have to listen. For you to listen, you must avoid distractions. You must pay attention. And at the end, you have retention. And for you to have retention, number 3 says, you must stay focused. I can stay focused and have 100% concentration. And for this to happen, you must be following instructions. You must be following corrections. taking you where? In the right direction for your desired positive destination. And finally, if 1 to 4, you're still having issues with it, then you need to ask questions. You need to seek clarity. You must avoid assumptions. Don't think this is what my teacher is saying. Find out if that is what he or she is actually saying. You must avoid assumptions. You must be right, because the first mistake you make, you may not have a room to correct it again. So before you take that step, be sure it's the right one. You must seek clarity. And please learn to speak your mind. Many a times, a student or students are in the classroom, a teacher is asked a question, and is skeptical. He doesn't want, or she doesn't want to raise her hand. Then somebody else puts up his or her hand and answers the question, and he tells his classmate, I knew the answer. No, you did not know it. If you knew it, you'll be confident enough to raise your hand to ask the question, to raise your hand to answer the question rather. So let's speak our mind. One thing about speaking your mind is this: you will be able to tell if you're right or if you're wrong. If you're right, it sticks. If you're wrong, you learn to correct it. So these are the 5 etiquette rules to learning. They are foundational and they cut across any discipline, be it in the sciences, in the arts, or in the social sciences. The 5 etiquette rules are golden. When you listen, you would learn. Remember, it's not just one listen. We have listen, listen, and listen. And it continues. You must continue to listen if you have to continue to learn. You must continue to listen if you will be learning. So let's take note of that. And that will be all for our foundational session in our first class. Thank you all for listening. Please subscribe, sign up to our channel, put the notification button, share, like, and bless every other student, bless every other learner, bless every other child with our learnings and teachings. Thank you for joining Educastle International Consult. Thank you for joining our channel. I remain your humble self, Master Soul. My humble self, I meant to say. Cheers.